for.
They're petrified
Yeah.
of some kind of backlash. I mean, you see with Disney now. I mean, Disney, one of the most gay-friendly companies.
A rising Hollywood star, a billion-dollar entertainment giant, and one of the most cherished fairy tales of all time. Mix these together and you'd expect a guaranteed blockbuster that fills theaters and captivates fans across the globe. Instead, we got a swirling storm of controversy, social media backlash, and one catastrophic moment on daytime television that sealed the fate of Disney's modernized Snow White remake. Before the dust even settled, the film had already become a lightning rod for debates about woke storytelling and studio censorship. Viewers were left questioning whether the classic tale had been twisted beyond recognition, or if maybe it was Rachel Zegler's outspoken personality that set everything ablaze. By the time you finish hearing the whole story, you'll see how one miscalculation led to another, building into a perfect storm that even Disney's legendary PR team couldn't contain. But don't think you've heard the most shocking part yet, because what happened behind closed doors will leave you stunned. And if you think one meltdown on The View was dramatic, just wait until you discover the backstage secrets that expose Disney's deepest anxieties. Disney's history of live-action remakes is hit or miss, but they typically rake in enough ticket sales to justify the gamble. From Beauty and the Beast to Aladdin, reimagined classics often walk a fine line between honoring the source material and offering a modern perspective. Executives assume nostalgia will carry fans back to theaters in droves.
Not surrounded by 7 weird people. Oh, okay, just CGI fictional goblins, I guess.
So why not push boundaries a bit and update the story for younger viewers? When the studio announced a new Snow White, fans had mixed reactions. On one hand, the original 1937 film is a bedrock of Disney's legacy, practically the crown jewel that launched the entire animated empire. On the other, the story is undeniably old-fashioned, featuring a damsel in distress who relies on a handsome prince and a band of dwarves. For a generation increasingly fixated on empowerment, that formula felt stale. Disney had to navigate these waters carefully, especially after controversies in previous live-action adaptations. Enter Rachel Zegler, a young actor fresh off West Side Story, bursting with talent and ambition. She seemed like the perfect choice to bring modern flair to a beloved classic. The idea was that her youthful energy and vocal presence would resonate with Gen Z, while longtime Disney fans would still appreciate the nostalgic aspects if the film honored them. Early reports hinted they'd remove the prince's central role, tweak the dwarves to be CGI magical creatures, and give Snow White a strong, independent woman vibe. At first glance, it looked like a bold reinvention, but behind the scenes, red flags were popping up. Hardcore Disney traditionalists on social media started complaining the film was already straying too far from the original magic. Meanwhile, progressive audiences wondered if Disney was truly willing to tackle modern themes, or if it would just pay lip service. But few people predicted how dramatically this tension would explode. Yet as divisive as these changes were, the real sparks flew once Rachel Zegler stepped in front of the camera and shared her unfiltered thoughts, launching a chain reaction that would soon spiral beyond Disney's control. Initially, fans were excited for a fresh face to revitalize an age-old fairy tale. Rachel Zegler had dazzled audiences with her voice and earnest performances. She seemed poised to be the next breakout Disney star, following in the footsteps of beloved live-action princesses like Emma Watson. But soon after filming Wrapped, the press tour began, and that's when it all started going wrong. In interviews, Zegler made blunt remarks about the original Snow White.
With Snow White, let's go through this, right? There's no prince. Woman doesn't need a prince.
Oh, Lord.
Really? Okay, good luck
up.
back then.
She described it as creepy, outdated, and not a story that people need anymore, according to quotes shared across social media. For older fans who idolized the classic, those words felt like a betrayal. Complaints surged that she was ridiculing a timeless masterpiece simply because it didn't fit her modern worldview. The tension escalated when clips circulated showing Zegler dismissing the traditional romantic storyline. She claimed the new Snow White was a real leader, not some helpless damsel. On paper, that sounds empowering, but for many Disney aficionados, it felt like an attack on the original spirit, especially since the prince was rumored to be cut or drastically minimized. Suddenly, Rachel Zegler wasn't just the star of a new adaptation, she was the unexpected spokesperson for a woke Hollywood machine. Meanwhile, Disney tried to downplay the controversy, insiders insisted that Zegler was just passionate about creating a modern role model for young girls. But those explanations fell flat in the face of her viral soundbites, which kept fueling internet outrage. And that was all before her name crossed paths with Joe Rogan, who was more than willing to shine a giant spotlight on this brewing storm. But if you think a few viral comments were enough to sink an entire Disney blockbuster, just wait until you see how Joe Rogan's unfiltered critique magnified every crack in the production and turned one actress into Hollywood's most controversial new face.
And I get it, there's a difference between spoiling and whatever, but to go out and badmouth everybody and talk smack about, older movies in the same franchise, the canon story, I guess?
Yeah.
I don't know, dude. I feel like they would have had better control over that.
Joe Rogan has always been a magnet for controversy, known for questioning everything from corporate politics to celebrity culture. When he started dissecting the Snow White fiasco on his podcast, it was bound to draw massive attention. He wasted no time calling Disney out, accusing the studio of getting so tangled in woke messaging that they lost sight of what makes a story timeless. Rogan's central argument was that Disney, in trying to modernize the beloved fairy tale, managed to alienate the very fans who love it most, removing the prince, turning dwarves into CGI figures, and then hiring an outspoken lead who seemed to have zero nostalgia for the original. In his eyes, it was a recipe for disaster. He openly mocked the idea of a Snow White who doesn't need a prince, suggesting that if you strip the heart out of a classic, you might as well create a brand new story altogether. He then leveled criticism directly at Rachel Zegler for taking Disney's paycheck while voicing strong opinions that undermined the film's marketing. To him, her statements felt contradictory, like she wanted to stand against old-fashioned tropes, but only after she'd already cashed in on the role.
A series of controversies is threatening to derail the opening of Disney's latest big-budget blockbuster. I'm talking about the live-action remake of Snow White, which will be out next week.
People who'd been on the fence about the remake suddenly saw a reason to boycott, saying they wouldn't support someone who bashed the original. Disney's track record with controversies is extensive, but Rogan hammered them for being petrified of backlash. He argued that their push for a thoroughly modern reimagining was less about genuine progressiveness and more about corporate fear of being labeled outdated or insensitive. Yet ironically, by trying so hard to avoid a negative press, they ended up walking straight into an even bigger storm. Still, none of Rogan's critique or Zegler's viral comments could match the spectacle that unfolded on live television, where one ill-fated appearance on The View became the unforgettable meltdown that exposed Disney's shaky foundations. Daytime talk shows often serve as a safe space for celebrities promoting controversial films. Producers coordinate everything in advance, from the host's questions to the star's answers. The goal is to display unity, avoid scandal, and pivot the narrative in a positive direction. For Disney, sending Rachel Zegler to The View should have been a routine stop on the press circuit, a chance to charm casual viewers while clarifying any misconceptions. But things did not go according to plan. According to multiple eyewitness accounts, tension began the moment Zegler arrived. She was reportedly given a strict set of talking points: focus on the film's empowerment message, reassure fans the core of Snow White remains intact, and steer clear of any direct condemnation of the original. But once the cameras rolled, she showed no intention of holding back.
Our fans are growing more concerned about Disney's new Snow White remake, mostly because of what the lead actress has been saying to the press. Rachel Zegler has been described as a walking PR disaster for Disney.
Midway through a polite back and forth, she allegedly drifted away from the prepared script and began reiterating how outmoded the classic storyline was. Producers tried to cut in or redirect the conversation, but Zegler pressed on, doubling down on her modern reinterpretation. Rumor has it she criticized the nostalgic fairy tale romance trope so bluntly that the hosts were left speechless. Right then, as the live broadcast clock ticked away, producers made a snap decision. They attempted to shut down the segment. Some claim it was a technical difficulty, others say they abruptly went to commercial. By the time the show returned, Rachel Zegler was nowhere to be seen. Word spread that she'd been quietly escorted out to avert further damage. Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar fumbled with filler conversation, leaving viewers confused and social media erupting in real time. From Disney's perspective, this was a worst-case scenario. Their star had openly contradicted the film's promotional spin on live television. Not only did it validate fans' fears that Snow White was being fundamentally altered, but it also revealed the studio's inability to control its own lead actress. In an age of instant tweets and viral video clips, the meltdown was immortalized almost the moment it happened. Yet if you think that public fiasco was the final nail in the coffin, in, buckle up, because the tension behind the scenes escalated in ways that made the on-camera drama look tame by comparison. While the public digested rumors of Zegler's removal from The View, insiders were whispering about deeper fractures within the production. Supposedly, Bob Iger himself was alarmed. A man known for smooth control over Disney's image found himself dealing with a meltdown that threatened to overshadow every project on the studio's slate.
There's more. There's always more. Let's have a listen.
I mean, you know, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story.
Disney's usual crisis management approach is swift. Coordinate statements, schedule interviews on friendly outlets, and release carefully crafted explanations. But controlling Rachel Zegler proved far more difficult. She was either unwilling or unable to pivot to a fluffy marketing spin. Some studio insiders admired her authenticity, but higher-ups viewed her public stance as sabotage. Meanwhile, the film's other big star, Gal Gadot, stayed noticeably quiet. Rumors buzzed about tension between the two leads, though specifics remained murky. Did they clash on political views, creative differences, or was Gadot simply staying clear of the hot seat? In any event, the negativity swirling around Zegler eclipsed any interest in their supposed on-screen chemistry. Even more shocking were the reports that Jonah Platt, whose father had producer ties to the Snow White project, posted scathing remarks about Zegler's stance on social media. The fact that someone in the film's extended circle felt compelled to speak out against the lead actress fueled speculation that Disney's leadership was at odds internally. Some rumored that the studio wanted to muzzle Zegler, while others whispered that top executives were rethinking how progressive the adaptation should be. Leaked behind-the-scenes chatter suggested that after the meltdown, Disney demanded stricter guidelines for interviews going forward. The marketing team was scrambling to shift focus away from Zegler's quotes and onto safer topics, such as the film's lavish set design or new musical numbers. But in the age of viral gotcha clips, damage control felt like a losing battle, and as backstage drama spilled out into public view, the box office was about to deliver its own ruthless verdict, leaving everyone wondering if the film could ever recover from this PR nightmare.
There were reportedly not even going to be dwarfs either. Rainbow people instead until it was a fan protest. And even the word dwarfs isn't mentioned in this remake. The film has people saying, don't mock sleepy as a neurological condition. And dopey isn't really dopey, that'd be rude.
In the months leading up to release, Disney's promotional materials tried to focus on the idea of a modern fairy tale. They showcased updated costumes, teased a more diverse set of companions instead of dwarves, and promised a story that emphasized Snow White's leadership qualities. But the chatter online was deafening, centered less on the movie's visuals and more on the controversies ignited by Rachel Zegler's interviews. When tickets finally went on sale, early tracking numbers were dismal. The typical Disney formula, massive family turnout, seemed to falter. Parents who might have otherwise taken their kids on opening weekend were bombarded with headlines about how drastically the film diverged from the cherished 1937 classic. Even star power from Gadot couldn't offset the negative buzz. Some critics preemptively panned the film, calling the new direction too bland, devoid of magic, or simply unwatchable. Reviewers also accused it of being a hollow attempt at modernity, criticizing what they saw as half-baked girl power tropes. It's not enough to say Snow White doesn't need a prince. One review lamented, you have to give her a compelling journey that justifies ditching the original arc. Meanwhile, those who might have supported an updated fairy tale were turned off by the swirling meltdown drama. As opening weekend came and went, the movie's numbers failed to impress. Polls suggested that even casual Disney fans were staying home or choosing other films. Rachel Zegler suddenly found herself labeled box office poison by certain corners of the internet. In reality, the film's troubles went far beyond any one individual, but she became the face of its failure, especially after that ill-fated appearance on The View. Social media erupted with memes that put her name side by side with the movie's disastrous ticket sales. Hashtags mocking Disney's woke agenda trended daily, and there was no shortage of armchair commentators declaring that this fiasco was proof audiences wouldn't tolerate heavy-handed rewrites of their favorite childhood stories. But what if the real root of the problem wasn't just a
Peter Dinklage questioned why the story even included the characters at all.
They were very proud to cast a Latino actress as Snow White.
Yeah.
But you're still telling the story of Snow White.
Yeah.
Seven Dwarfs.
Sure.
So. Look, take a step back and look at what you're doing there.
Failing box office. Because behind every disappointment lies a deeper lesson about how studios handle their remakes. And the next revelation would strike at the heart of Disney's entire strategy. Looking beyond the specifics, this Snow White disaster reveals the delicate tightrope studios walk when revamping classic tales. Longtime Disney fans have an emotional attachment to the originals, songs, characters, even the old-fashioned story beats. Once you strip those elements away, you're gambling on the hope that new audiences will show up to replace the old ones you've alienated. Disney's brand identity rests heavily on its legacy, yet in recent years, they've tried to demonstrate progress. That can mean more inclusive casting, modern social themes, and female leads who don't simply wait around to be rescued. In principle, that's not a bad thing, but the question becomes, how do you weave those updates in without insulting the core of what made the original beloved in the first place? Enter Rachel Zegler, whose passionate perspective collided head-on with Disney's carefully measured PR. She wasn't content to recite the usual talking points. She wanted to call out what she perceived as archaic, regressive storytelling. Disney, however, banked on her star power to promote a major release. When the meltdown happened on live TV, it underscored how deeply misaligned they were. Joe Rogan interpreted this fiasco as a textbook example of a corporation trying to ride the wave of social change without truly committing to it. If you aim to modernize a story, you must accept the backlash from purists. And if your star is outspoken, you have to let them speak. Trying to muzzle an actress mid-interview only makes the entire production look artificial. Yet there's another layer to consider, the notion of woke backlash. Some viewers see progressive updates as forced or pandering. For them, hearing Zegler slam the original, one of the most iconic movies in animation history, felt like the final straw. Suddenly, the conversation wasn't about whether the new Snow White was well crafted. It was about how politically correct or inauthentic it might be. Once that narrative takes hold, it's almost impossible to revive genuine interest in the film's merits. But if you think the script ends here, hold on, because the final twist in this saga reveals how one meltdown can shape the entire future of Disney remakes, and how Rachel Zegler might still rewrite her story in the aftermath.
You actually just erased the dwarfism side of it, the disability, like we're a disability group. You just erase that whole image.
What started as a promising update to a cherished fairy tale ended as a cautionary tale for Hollywood. On paper, Snow White should have been a straightforward crowd pleaser, buoyed by massive nostalgia and a talented cast. Instead, it spiraled into a fiasco that exposed the tension between corporate risk management, fan expectations, and an actor's personal convictions. Rachel Zegler found herself in the eye of the storm. Her decision to speak openly about her issues with the original Snow White may have been genuine, but it clashed head-on with Disney's desire for a controversy-free rollout. When that tension spilled onto the view, the meltdown became the story, overshadowing anything the film might have offered in terms of entertainment or innovation. Disney, for its part, may rethink its approach to live-action remakes. Joe Rogan believes they'll be more cautious about reworking classics in ways that stray too far from the beloved source material. The studio might also impose stricter guidelines on stars, demanding everyone stay on message to avoid PR disasters. But that approach brings its own risks. Viewers can sniff out insincerity, and actors resent feeling muzzled. In the end, the meltdown hammered home a simple truth: authenticity matters. If the studio wants to champion modern values, they must commit wholeheartedly, without undermining an actress who shares those values in an unpolished way. And if an actor wants to critique outdated elements in a story, they must be prepared for how fans and powerful corporations will react. For Rachel Zegler, this controversy could become a footnote if she navigates future projects with the same passion, but a bit more finesse. Hollywood is quick to label someone box office poison, then just as quick to move on when a new success arrives. Whether she can transform this PR nightmare into a learning experience remains to be seen. Meanwhile, fans of the original Snow White have made one thing clear: they won't quietly accept a drastic reimagining that disrespects what they treasure, and studios everywhere are taking notes, realizing that even with an iconic brand, success is never guaranteed when you venture too far from the formula. So what's next for Disney's live-action machine? They'll keep trying to strike gold, but the shadow of the Snow White meltdown will loom large. Viewers will be watching to see if the House of Mouse truly respects its own legacy, or if another fiasco might be lurking around the corner. And there you have it, a modern-day cautionary epic about one film, one outspoken star, and a corporation caught off guard by the very conversation it tried so hard to control. In the end, the biggest lesson might be that no matter how woke or modern you attempt to be, there's no substitute for authenticity, and there's no bigger enemy to box office success than a PR meltdown on live television.